Welcome to the PSAV Hive at MPI, and we have a blue ribbon panel assembled here to talk to you today about a subject that's important to all meeting professionals: high-speed internet access, what every meeting professional needs to know. I'm joined by Todd Walton, MGM.
Good morning, Bill.
Welcome. John Reese, PSAV.
Good morning.
And Michael Owen, Evengenuity.
Hi, Bill.
Welcome all of you and each of you, and I appreciate the time you can give us talking about this subject. I'm going to start with you, Todd, because it impacts all components of the industry, but certainly the hotelier uniquely has some responsibilities in HSIA and some challenges. Of all the issues you're facing as an industry, how do you rank HSIA as an issue and why?
I think it's probably one of the leading issues that we're faced with. I wouldn't say we were caught unaware, but the technology explosion over the last few years has been immense. And we also happen to have that happen at probably the worst possible time during this great recession, and trying to catch up with the infrastructure. Now we've been fortunate, we've made a huge investment into it, but I think facilities around the country are really struggling trying to get there. And then the other side of it is the communication out to the meeting planners, and that we're all talking the same language and understanding how we meet their needs and vice versa. So.
Do you think, and I'll ask Michael this, I guess, do you think, Michael, that meeting planners understand the complexity of the issue and what hotels have to accommodate?
No, and I'm not sure they have to understand the complexity. You just have to understand your attendee needs. And I don't know that you need to drill down even into the technology, but to your point, Todd, it is one of the leading issues, and it's also one of the least talked about issues when you're putting together a plan. I mean, you wouldn't send out a request for proposal that says, I need food, without qualifying. Right. So you have to be able to, with internet access now, because the attendee expectation is so much different. When we began this conversation around the Convention Industry Council's Apex Commission, I defaulted to content delivery, because that's kind of the business that I'm in. Oh yeah, we need to talk about high-speed internet access for webcasting and for streaming video and those types of things, not thinking that I had two appliances running at that very minute, that it's a very different audience that you have now with the advent of the smartphone and the iPad and tablets and those. Everyone's connected all the time.
Well, I know all three of you, I think, are serving on the Apex Working Committee, right?
Yeah. Correct.
And
yep.
John, what's the committee working on, and what's kind of coming out of it?
Well, basically what we're trying to do is educate the meeting planner community and the venue operators as well to what, to Michael's point, what are your needs? You know, we're trying to get them to understand if you have mission critical needs, you know, what do you need, how much bandwidth do you need for that? It's interesting, when we went around the table and we talked about to the meeting planners, do you know how much bandwidth you used on your last meeting? Do you know the bandwidth requirements for your next meeting? They had no understanding at all of those things, because as an industry, we haven't really touched on that question. We haven't armed them with the information they need to ask. And so they've chosen to remain ignorant to a certain degree, and we're saying, well, we're going to create some tools that helps people understand it, because I think they thought it was so complex that they just didn't even want to spend the time on it. And I think what we've been able to do, and I think Michael would agree, is we've been able to boil this down into something that's very easy to understand. You don't need to understand exactly what's happening behind the wall. You just need to understand the questions that you need to ask. And then the venue operators, they just say, well, we'll let our experts deal with that. You know, it's either the AV guy or the IT guy. What we're saying is, no, if you're a sales professional in a hotel or a convention center, you also need to understand how to answer questions that the meeting planners have. So I think what we've done on the CIC, the Apex site, is given so far a lot of tools that makes it very easy for meeting planners to understand the questions to ask, and venue operators to be able to answer those questions.
Yeah, one of the things I think you're working on is a bandwidth calculator. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
What is it? I mean,
well, it enables you, I mean, it's not the end-all be-all, but it's a start. It's a great start. It enables you to plug in the number of users, the type of users. Are they light users, medium users, heavy users? And it kind of instructs you on the different levels of here's what you can expect from these. And then you put those numbers in, and it gives you an estimate of what you would need for bandwidth. I think it's a very interesting start. And I know one of the things that we're talking about, someone asked about, well, what about the large groups, the big 15,000 and over, and we're beginning to look now at some case studies of what their usage is. You know, the whole purpose is to have a planner understand what their audience is. I recently went to a conference. It's the very first conference since the advent of, or the influx, let's say, of all the appliances that people are using. And in the registration, it said, do you have a smartphone? Are you planning to bring it? Do you have an iPad? Are you planning to bring it and use it on site? Do you have? And when we got there, as a result, our experience was very, very good. Conversely, a week before that, I was at another industry event where they had the opening session dependent on technology. And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to do audience response, but instead of the audience response tool, he said, download this app, everybody goes at once. It crashes the 3G because they didn't buy Wi-Fi, and it never worked. Well, they didn't ask the question beforehand.
Do you think, because it seems to me like this is a far more complicated issue than planners give it credit for, because there's tangible hard edge things. You have facilities, you have investments that have to be made. Is anybody aware, how do you keep that cycle in order? I mean,
Well, I think to some extent it's broken a little bit. We're trying to catch up into that. Right. As I mentioned earlier with the recession, technology is advanced. I mean, 3 years ago, we were looking at a completely different picture than we're looking at today. And the investment that's needed, the timeline of installing the technology, the engineering that goes into a high density system, which is completely different than a Starbucks. You know, when you are dealing with over 1,000 access points in this building, those all have to be tuned, and there's an engineering aspect. So what I mean by it's broken, though, is I think we're going to get there, we're catching up, but it's really, you know, where do we put our money in investing? Meeting planners need the investment, facilities to make this investment in technology, because technology is driving meetings. That's going to be the future of our industry. So understanding, getting a handle around is going to be very important. But on the other hand, unless the facilities themselves can figure out how to monetize the system, it's hard to go to a CFO of a company and say, hey, we want you to spend X millions of dollars, and the first thing that CFO is going to ask is, what's the payback? What's the return on investment? And when you say zero, that conversation ends. So there's got to be a way to address some of these things from a facility side, and we're struggling through that. I think there's a level that it is an amenity, that we provide a base level. But when you're talking about mission critical, when you're talking about large groups, high amount of bandwidth, I think there is a fee that you have to realize that needs to be charged. And just for the meeting planning industry itself, they've got to invest this money as they would in food, because we need the facilities to build the infrastructure to support the meetings of the future. So.
And I think what we're trying to do, though, is shift the conversation to bandwidth consumption. So, because they understand if they're consuming something, that there's a price they have to pay for it. Before, when they talked about the internet, they were talking about their experience at Starbucks or limited service venue, and they were getting that for free. Right. But they didn't realize what they were getting. When they actually quantify the bandwidth that they're getting, it's a very small amount of bandwidth. So it's not enough to do the meetings that they need to do. So if we shift the conversation to the fact that, you know, there might be great opportunities to provide free internet access in certain parts of the program. But when you talk about mission critical components of your program, you have to understand what the bandwidth requirements are, and you're consuming something. So, you know, I think meeting planners are starting to understand that, and we've never really educated them to the fact that they are consuming something. We've never, you know, as an industry, there's no reporting. There hasn't been. There is now, but there's no reporting. So if I ask a meeting planner, you know, about their bandwidth usage, you know, they didn't know. I think as they become more educated about it, what they did last program, what they're going to need for the next program, as they get the reporting from the venues that are capable of giving them the reporting, then they're going to understand, I'm okay with paying for that. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to negotiate the price, but I understand that I have to pay for that service.
And are hoteliers getting better at giving them these reports? Because it seems pretty important to be able to say, here's what you consume.
I think it's a real mixed bag. I think we've just created a suite of reports for clients when they come to one of our resorts that all clients are getting. We're working on additional reporting, but I think we're kind of standing out alone in that area. But I think what helps drive that is if meeting planners are starting to have that, you know, what am I paying for? I would love to see a report on this. They should be asking the facilities there. With that demand will come the reporting. So it takes both the facilities to drive the conversation, it takes the meeting planners to drive the conversation. I think collectively coming at it from both sides, we'll get there. Another thing to remember, we're only talking 3 years here. You know, if we invented food catering 3 years ago, we would be having some of those same problems. I mean, it really is now just becoming the issue that it is. And I think while we may say meeting planners are slow adopters, we really haven't given them a lot of time to adopt, and we haven't given them the tools. And I think that's one of the things that we're working on.
Well, and I think, and as we kind of wind down, remembering that our topic was what every meeting professional needs to know about HSIA, what would be one thing, and we'll go around the table here and say, what is the one thing the meeting professional
Again,
should need to know?
I would focus on mission critical. What is mission critical? Making sure that you have planned for dedicated bandwidth for that presenter, that CEO. If it's a cloud-based meeting, to make sure that there's dedicated bandwidth. Really understand who needs what and make sure they have what they need, and it's dedicated. It's not going to be shared by any other person in that room or any other group.
Great. Todd?
Yeah, and I would, tagging on to what John said, understand your needs. I mean, you know, ask for the reporting that, have the conversation with the facility. Try to keep track your usage for the different events and stuff. Build a base knowledge level where you can have a conversation with the facility at a little bit higher level. It's a wonderful world. I mean, we're moving into something that's going to change, I think, fundamentally, maybe the way we do meetings. There's great things coming down the line, like, you know, wayfinding, where you can find out in an expo, I want to go from here to here, how do I get there? Push notification, the speaker has changed to this room and stuff. There's some great things that are going to be used for meeting planners. So I think just helping advance that conversation. Meeting planners have got to do some studying. Facilities have got to do some studying. We've got to do some education, and there's no excuse for not doing it at this point.
Michael?
And for me, I would say, first thing I would say is don't make connectivity an afterthought or a negotiating point. It needs to be thought of up front. It needs to be thought of on the same level as your room block and pickups, your food and beverage, your transportation. It's that important in today's industry. And if you understand your needs, I've said over and over again, this is not to justify you spending more money. It's to understand what your needs are. Maybe you have a group that's not technologically savvy and free internet's all you need. But if you don't understand that, your attendees are going to be disappointed. And if they're disappointed, are they going to be disappointed in the vendor, or are they going to be disappointed in you as a planner? And are you willing to take the risk that somebody else is going to get blamed for that? So I think it's very important that in your RFP process, that high-speed internet access and connectivity moves from an afterthought to the very front of the discussions, and you have a rich discussion with a trusted advisor.
Perfect, thanks, Michael. Is it, to wrap this up, a year from now when we meet, will we have solved some of these things? It's just time. It's just time.
I think we're still going to be working on it.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. John, Todd, Michael, thank you guys.
Bill, thank you, Bill.
Great subject, and we appreciate your time.
Terrific.
And thank you for joining us, and join us for a future episode.